My name is Gerald. I'm 84 years old. And in 1974, I made the biggest financial mistake of my life. I panicked during the oil crisis, and I sold everything. My stocks, my retirement account, everything. I put it all in cash, because I was terrified, and by the time the market recovered 2 years later, I'd locked in losses I never recovered from. This is about the day I let fear make my decisions, and what it cost me for the next 50 years. In 1973, I was 33 years old. I'd been working at an insurance company for 10 years. Married to Linda, 2 kids. I had about $15,000 in a retirement account. Company pension, stock investments, not a fortune, but decent. Growing steadily. Then, in October 1973, the oil embargo hit. Arab nations stopped selling oil to the United States. Gas prices exploded overnight. I remember driving to work and seeing gas stations with lines wrapped around the block. People waiting 2 hours to fill their tanks. Audi van rationing. If your license plate ended in an odd number, you could only buy gas on odd days. The news was terrifying. Every night, stories about the energy crisis, the economy collapsing, inflation rising, and the stock market started dropping. In October 1973, the market was around 110. By December, it was at 95. I watched my retirement account shrink from $15,000 to $13,000 in 2 months, and I panicked. I called my broker. I said, "Get me out. Sell everything." He said, "Gerald, this is a bad time to sell. The market's down. You're locking in losses." I said, "I don't care. I want cash. Now," he said, "if you wait, this will recover. It always does." I said, "What if it doesn't? What if this is different?" He tried to talk me out of it, but I wouldn't listen. On January 15th, 1974, I sold everything, cashed out my entire retirement account, took a 20% loss, put $12,000 in a savings account earning 5% interest. I thought I was being smart, protecting myself, getting out before it got worse. Linda said, "Gerald, are you sure about this?" I said, "The economy's collapsing. I'm protecting our future," she said. "But everyone says to hold on during downturns." I said, "Everyone's wrong. This time is different." And I sat back, convinced I'd dodged a disaster. The market kept dropping through 1974. By October 1974, it was at 60, down 45% from its peak. I felt vindicated. I'd gotten out before the worst of it. My friends who stayed in, they were down 40%, 50% on their retirement accounts, and I was sitting in cash, safe. But then something happened that I didn't expect. The market started recovering. By early 1975, it was back to 75. By late 1975, it was at 90. By 1976, it had recovered everything it lost, back to 110. My friends who stayed in, they were whole again. Their accounts were back to where they started. And me, I was still sitting in cash with $12,000 because I'd sold at the bottom. I called my broker in 1976. I said, "Should I get back in now?" He said, "Gerald, the market's up 80% from when you sold. If you'd stayed in, you'd have everything back plus growth." I said, "So should I buy back in?" He said, "At these prices, you're buying high after selling low. That's the worst possible strategy." But I didn't want to buy back in at higher prices. So I waited for another crash, another opportunity to get in at the bottom. That crash didn't come. The market kept growing. 1977, 1978, 1979, 1980. My $12,000 sat in a savings account earning 5%. My friends' retirement accounts growing 10%, 12%, 15% per year. By 1980, the market was at 135. My friends who stayed in had turned $15,000 into $30,000, $35,000, even $40,000 depending on their holdings. I still had $12,000 plus 6 years of interest, maybe $15,500 total. I'd lost 6 years of growth because I panicked in 1974, Linda said. Gerald, we need to get back in the market. I said, it's too high. I'll wait for it to come back down. It never came back down to where I sold. By 1990, my friends were retiring with $200,000, $300,000 in their accounts. I had maybe $40,000 because I'd stayed in cash for 16 years. By 2000, they had $500,000. $700,000, I had $80,000. By 2010, they had over $1 million. I had $120,000. All because I sold everything in 1974 and never got back in. I'm 84 years old now. I retired at 67 with $140,000 in savings. My friend Tom, who worked the same job, same salary, retired with $850,000. The only difference? He held on during the 1973 oil crisis, and I panicked and sold. That one decision in January 1974 cost me over $700,000. Not because I lost the money. I didn't lose it. I just never gained it back. Because I sold at the bottom and stayed out during the recovery. Here's what I finally understand at 84. Fear is the worst financial advisor. In 1973, everyone was terrified. The news made it sound like the end of the world. Oil embargo, gas lines, inflation, recession. It felt different. It felt permanent, but it wasn't. By 1976, the crisis was over. The market recovered. Life went on. And the people who held on came out fine. The people like me, who panicked and sold, locked in losses we never recovered from. I spent 50 years trying to catch up to where I would have been if I'd just done nothing, if I'd just held on, if I'd just ignored the fear, but I didn't. And that decision in 1974 defined my entire financial life. When 2008 happened, I was 68, retired. The market crashed again. My small retirement account dropped 30%. And this time, I held on. Because I remembered 1974. I remembered selling at the bottom. I remembered missing the recovery. And I refused to make the same mistake twice. The market recovered by 2010. My account recovered too. But I learned that lesson 34 years too late. If I'd learned it in 1974, I'd have retired a millionaire. Instead, I've retired with barely enough, and I live on Social Security and a small pension. While Tom, who made the same salary and had the same life, lived comfortably on $850,000 because he didn't panic. And I did. If you're reading this and you're watching the news about wars, crises, market crashes, and you're thinking about selling everything, stop. Ask yourself, am I making this decision from evidence or from fear? Because the decisions you make from fear in the middle of a crisis, you'll regret in the calm after it's over. I know, because I've lived with that regret for 50 years. I'm Gerald, and I sold everything in 1974 because I was afraid, and I never got it back.